Hello there, Cat fans. Welcome into another edition of our weekly Cat Chat here on the KSU CatZone, brought to you by the Topeka Capital Journal. Alongside me, as always, Ken Corbitt, our lead K-State beat writer here at the Capital Journal. I am Andy Burns. This week, we'll get into K-State's big win over Texas Tech, their looming showdown in Norman against Oklahoma, and maybe even a little basketball by the end of the show, Ken. That's coming up here on today's episode. First off, we'll get into the K-State game against Texas Tech this weekend in Manhattan. The Wildcats outscore Texas Tech and win that game 44-38. K-State now moves to 3-2 overall, 1-1 in the Big 12. Kenny, just some general takeaways from this game from you.
Well, I think it was kind of a typical K-State game. They played very good defense, got just enough offense, but they got touchdowns off the defense and special teams, which is always important for K-State to have, those extra sources of point production. So overall, the offense wasn't as dynamic as you would like against Texas Tech, but they did enough things to be able to win the game.
And you mentioned that offense. They rushed for 231 yards and 2 touchdowns. Charles Jones has 128 of those with one of the touchdowns. Kenny, your advance in Friday's Capital Journal, you can find that story online as well. Centers on Charles Jones, and what did he kind of have to say this week about that game?
He just wanted to be more aggressive. That's always been the kind of thing with Charles. He kind of gets going sideways a little bit, kind of dances, looks for some holes. And that's the thing that Bill Snyder's always talked about. And we want Charles to be aggressive and run straight forward. And for the most part, he did that.
And Jesse Ertz adding a career-high 83 rushing yards on 10 attempts with the other touchdown for K-State. Delvin Warmack getting in there, having 8 carries for 21 yards for K-State. Winston Dimmel just added 1 carry for 1 yard there. So it looks to me like K-State, Kenny, we talked about early in the season how this backfield was a little crowded, how they needed somebody to kind of step up and really take that starting spot. It looks like Charles Jones has taken that first spot, and Delvin Warmack maybe being the key back up there.
Yeah, I think so. Justin Silman didn't play in that game. He had an injury, so again, we don't know what the injury was to Justin, but he wasn't available to play. But, I think that was the big thing. For a running back, he needs carries. He needs to get into a rhythm. Charles Jones had 19 carries in that game, which was a career high, and I think that's a big part of establishing that rhythm and having a successful ground game.
And I think K-State's offense just as a whole wants to get that ground game going. I think that's very important for Bill Snyder's offense, as it always has been. K-State only has 104 passing yards on the day. Isaiah Zuber does make a nice play, though, with that touchdown play on the sideline, diving for the pylon in the end zone. And Jesse Ertz didn't turn the ball over. I think people, like you mentioned, people want more dynamic plays out of the offense, but I don't think you can argue when we complained a week ago about how Jesse Ertz seemed to play better, and then he comes in, scores a touchdown, doesn't turn the ball over. I don't think you can really complain too much about the offense the way that they handled themselves on Saturday.
No, they're starting to develop some more things. You mentioned Isaiah Zuber. Bill Snyder was asked about him Tuesday, a young freshman. Bill says the light isn't quite on yet. He said they're starting to get a little glimmer, but it's not on all the way yet. But you throw in Isaiah, who's a freshman, Byron Pringle's a sophomore, Dominique Heath, a sophomore, and we haven't seen Isaiah Harris, a freshman who played in that Florida Atlanta game, a true freshman. So that's maybe a little disconcerting that you might have burned a year for him, then he's not playing. And another guy is Corey Sutton, another freshman. So, there's some talent coming up in that receiving corps, and I think as they get more experience, that's going to help Jesse out and be a much more dynamic passing game.
A lot of talent and a lot of young talent there in that K-State receiving corps. Let's talk about the defense, though. Really a story of two halves in this game for me, for K-State. And at halftime, I don't remember the exact numbers. You might have them off the top of your head, but they were on pace to allow, I think, over 600 yards of total offense, and Mahomes was just in a zone in the first half. K-State couldn't do really much to stop him. DJ Ray did have the pick six in the first quarter, but other than that, K-State's defense just really didn't have an answer for Texas Tech in the first half. And then they give up 28 points in the first half, and then in the second half they come out, they give up only 10 points. 7 of those were with 5 seconds left to go in the game, a really kind of a meaningless touchdown, to be honest with you. And they got more pressure on Mahomes. He looked more uncomfortable. They had a couple of fourth down stops. They had the big stop down by the goal line. That defense really just turned it on in the second half. What happened there?
It is. They turned on the pressure. And as I said, it started at the end of the first half when Jordan Willis got a sack on Mahomes. And I think they realized then they need to turn up the pressure and get him on the move. When they flushed Mahomes out of the pocket and made him throw on the run, he wasn't nearly as comfortable or as effective. So, they talked about disguising some coverages in the secondary and the pressure up front, but it's just a much more aggressive defense that changed things.
Texas Tech came into this game as one of the best offenses in the country, arguably the best offense in the country, and K-State holds them to just 10 points again in that second half. And you could really argue that touchdown at the end of the game was meaningless. What can we take away from this defense then? After such a really bad first half and a great second half, Where are we kind of sitting here with this defense, do you think?
Well, it was reminiscent of the Stanford game. Pretty much they did the same thing that game. So I don't know if it's just an adjustment period. I mean, obviously Tom Hayes, the defensive coordinator, and his defensive staff made some adjustments as they went along. So possibly that's a good sign if you can recognize those things and make them change. But you don't want to get too far behind and not be able to make a comeback. But in Stanford and this game, Stanford, they were close. This game, they were actually ahead at halftime, despite giving up all those yards. So
Right.
I think it's just the in-game adjustments they're making, I think, is a good sign.
Number 19, Oklahoma waits for the Wildcats this weekend in Manhattan. And maybe I'm looking a little too far into it, but K-State seems to play better in Norman against Oklahoma than they do in Manhattan. K-State, they lost 55-0 last year in Manhattan. I think everybody kind of remembers that game. K-State lost in 2011. They lost in 2013. All three of those games in Manhattan. But K-State won in 2012 in Norman. They won in 2014 in Norman. Am I looking too much into this?
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, 5 straight games the visiting team has won, but I think it always comes down to turnovers a lot. Last year, K-State had 3 interceptions in the game. The last 2 wins in Norman, K-State had no turnovers. Oklahoma had 5. K-State scored a defensive touchdown in both of those wins in Norman in 2012-14. So, again, that K-State formula, play some defense, get some non-offensive touchdowns, is really big for them.
And Oklahoma, they've kind of struggled to meet expectations this year. They're sitting at 3-2. They do still have a very high-powered offense, though. They average 528 yards per game, over 40 points a game. How does this K-State offense going to kind of combat that Oklahoma offense? K-State defense, going to combat that Oklahoma offense?
Yeah, it's just another week in the Big 12 for these offenses. I think this may be the most balanced offense they faced. I mean, West Virginia ran the ball well in the second half, kind of made a difference in that game. Texas Tech just threw the ball. Oklahoma, there are so many things they can do. Baker Mayfield can pass and throw. They have 2 great running backs with Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon, who can both get 200 yards a game. Great receivers. D.D. Westbrook, outstanding receiver. His last 2 games, he's had touchdown plays of 67, 40, 71, 40, 42, and 47 yards. So big play guy. Last week, they were like the 5th time ever that a team had a 300-yard passer, a 200-yard rusher, a 200-yard receiver in one game. So they're going to get you one way or the other.
And so the defense, like most of the rest of the conference for Oklahoma, not really all that good. They're allowing 428 yards a game, 36 points per game. This K-State offense, we know they want to run the football. Is that just kind of the key for this K-State offense against the Oklahoma defense?
Absolutely. I mean, they've been able to do that in the past. And seeing the defense numbers for Oklahoma is very surprising. Mike and Bob Stoops have got to just be going nuts. You always hear some explosions out of the coaching booth from Mike Stoops when things aren't going well. So,
Yep.
But again, I mean, that's K-State's best offense. Run that ball, get that established. Oklahoma's a little better against the run than they are the pass. They've struggled against the pass, so that may be the key for K-State is to unleash that passing game. And if you make a couple deep ball completions, that's going to help your running game even more.
That game kicks off at 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday from Norman. Kenny, can we get a prediction out of you?
You think you're going to see another offensive shootout like you've had the last couple of weeks. I think the defenses may finally be stepping up a little bit, but K-State, I don't know if they can do quite enough offensively again. Oklahoma has struggled, but eventually Oklahoma's going to have to win a home game in this series. But I picked Oklahoma to win 30-24.
Okay. Well, having said that, let's talk some basketball here. The coaches' preseason poll just released earlier today, I believe. K-State picked to finish 9th in the conference. Any thoughts on that?
I'm a little surprised they're that low, considering what other teams around the Big 12 lost from last year, what K-State has coming back, plus a couple pieces they've added. But awfully good league. But, when you have a lot of new coaches in the league, maybe it's kind of hard to pick some of the teams. They're picked behind Oklahoma State, which has Brad Underwood coming in, but they also get Juwan Evans and Phil Forte back, who were injured last year. K-State only ahead of TCU, which has a new coach. So it's going to be an interesting year. I mean, KU's at the top, of course, big surprise there.
Right.
But I think it's going to be those middle pack teams is going to be quite a race again, kind of like football has been the last couple of years. So,
right.
There's maybe 1 or 2 really top level teams, and then you're kind of bunched in the middle.
K-State the last couple of years, though, has struggled. They haven't made the postseason in the last 2 seasons. Is this fair to say that it's a make or break year for Bruce Weber?
Yeah, everyone says that. You can't miss the tournament continue every year. I mean, he's John Curry's hired. John Curry is firmly behind him, but I think the big thing is show some progress. I mean, I think maybe what people forget last year is they actually did have a winning record. I mean, it was 17-16, just one game over. Losing Kamal Stokes at the end of the year really hurt them. But, yeah, it's a big year for Bruce. I mean, it's no secret that a lot of the fan base has never been solidly behind him. And it got turned up a little more last year when Oklahoma State went out and hired Brad Underwood, former K-State player and assistant coach who the fans love. So, especially now, that comparison is going to be made a lot more. So it's a big year for Bruce. They've got a pretty tough non-conference schedule, but some winnable games. They just need to get off to a good start and get some confidence rolling.
K-State had their media day availability earlier this week. Was anything major come out of that? Any news we need to know about? Any notes that are worth passing along?
Nothing surprising. We saw them scrimmage last Saturday before the football game. I think one guy to watch maybe this year is Isaiah Maurice, a redshirt freshman. He's one of their big guys, 6'10", was not able to play last year. He's kind of like, in a way, like Stephen Hurt is. He's a big 6'10" guy who likes to step outside and hit threes and everything. But Bruce said he has a nice jump hook shot if he can get inside. But I think the thing to look for K-State this year is more size. With Maurice, with Dante Williams, freshman James Love, those are 3 6'10" guys who can come off the bench and help inside. But the sophomores, Dean Wade, Kamal Stokes, Barry Brown, all good freshman years. They're a year more experienced as sophomores now. You got Wesley Wundu and DJ Johnson. So I think they have a lot of good pieces in place if they can just hit some shots and play their normal defense and not turn the ball over. I think this team has a possibility of being, I don't predict they're going to win the Big 12, but I think they can definitely finish in the upper half of the conference and get into that NCAA tournament.
And you wrote a story on DJ Johnson and his recovery for Tuesday's Capital Journal. You can find that story online as well. And talking about how his recovery from foot surgery in 2014, now he's back to full health. He has that medical red shirt. He seems like he's been around that K-State program forever. How important is DJ Johnson to this team?
He's big. He's their energy guy. I mean, he's always has a smile on his face around, but I mean, he's a guy that can go get a rebound, set a pick, but he's just the energy guy that they need to kind of get everyone going. Wesley Wundu's a little like that. He's a little more quiet, but BJ just has that infectious personality that can draw people to him and draw things around him and give the team a little energy.
Basketball season coming quickly. Exhibition games on October 28th and November the 4th against Pitt State and Washburn, respectively. K-State's first game that actually counts on November 11th against Western Illinois. Get to be a busy season for you there, Ken Corbitt.
The crossover season is always tough, October, November, December.
It's coming very quickly for us. Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of our Cat Chat. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching.